There was a lot of anger in the streets in Crown Heights, Brooklyn last night, and you can still feel that anger tonight. Police say a young black child was run over and killed by a car driven by a Hasidic Jew. In what seems to have been retaliation, cars were set afire and a Hasid was stabbed and killed. It was a dangerous and a frightening night. Tim Minton has the story, and he's live now in Crown Heights. Tim?
Bill, both sides tonight here demanding more police protection. The Hasidic community says that as revenge for the accident which killed the young boy, a Hasidic man, a Jewish man, was stabbed to death 2 hours later. They say it was revenge, but of course there are no hard and true facts here. There is just tension, there is just passion. And you can see behind me the police at the 71st Precinct clearly mobilizing at this hour. There is a demonstration ongoing by both sides in other parts of Brooklyn. So far, 6 police officers have been hurt by flying rocks. 3 people have been arrested. Faced with yet another racially fueled emotional fire, the city sent in one of its chief healers today. But Deputy Mayor Bill Lynch found community leaders demanding answers he can't yet provide. The problem began just after 8 last night when a car driven by a Hasidic man went out of control, eventually slamming into a pair of 7-year-old children. Gavin Cato was dead on arrival at the hospital. His cousin Angela Cato remains in serious condition tonight. The station wagon's driver was treated and released from a different hospital after being rushed there by the private Hatzola ambulance, and it's that treatment which ignited the initial debate.
Their medical attention was not the same medical attention that the Jewish gentleman got. You understand what I'm saying? They helped him before they helped the children, and the children were the victims, not him.
The medical help, as they arrived, EMS first on Utica Avenue, the private ambulance on President Street, went to those victims of the accident where the police directed them to.
But EMS and the police borough commander this afternoon took issue with Hatzola's account, insisting that the private ambulance beat the cities to the scene by several minutes.
But I would think that anybody trained in medical assistance should help those who need it most.
Is that what happened last night?
I don't believe it did happen. I don't know what the reasons were. That's what we're looking into.
As for possible charges against the driver, police said he was questioned, but that the DA's office so far believes the evidence doesn't justify an arrest. And tonight, therefore, there are allegations and counter-allegations, but at the bottom line from community leaders on both sides, there is this. It is the feeling that the hatred here must run so deep that a traffic accident, albeit a fatal accident, could trigger what's going on here now.
In a car accident. Tim Malloy standing by now with the details. Tim?
Sheila, this is just about as ugly as it gets. Ethnic and racial differences exploding into violence on the streets. It started with a car accident about 24 hours ago. It escalated. Now there have been riots on and off throughout the day, and there is no sign at all that things are about to cool off.
Last night, a station wagon careening off President Street hit 2 7-year-old boys, killing Gavin Cato, critically injuring his cousin Angela. Within minutes, members of the black and Hasidic community were throwing rocks and bottles at each other. The driver of the car, an Hasidim, was badly beaten. A shot was fired eventually at the police. They were trying to intervene. And then a stabbing. 29-year-old Yankel Rosenbaum, a member of the Hasidic community, eventually died of stab wounds at Kings County Hospital. Today dawned ugly with charges. The little boys were left bleeding while the man who hit them was treated.
The first Hasidic ambulance arrived and took the drivers and left the kids there.
By today, the wounds had not healed. Harvey Lang and Michael Berman told me their car was attacked by young black men hurling rocks.
And all of a sudden, this mob of blacks started coming out and throwing bull.
A journalist who covers Crown Heights saw trouble coming.
It's more like individuals coming in from outside because they have a vested interest in stirring up racial tensions.
Then the confrontation, unsatisfied by a late afternoon meeting at the nearby 71st Precinct, where they demanded the driver of the car be charged with murder. A group of blacks led by Al Sharpton confronted several hundred Hasidim.
nothing to calm things down. Several hundred police officers were summoned to the scene. The police did manage to separate the two battling parties, but things did not calm down much. The evening brought more violence. The police, trying to separate blacks from Hasidim, used great restraint until they were pummeled by bottles. Those without riot gear literally were risking their lives. The police eventually were forced to pull back. 15 people have been injured out here so far tonight, 12 of them police officers. Extraordinary measures are being taken right now to try to cool things down out here. The Brooklyn DA wants a grand jury to investigate that car accident last night. He also wants an independent investigator to come in and reenact the accident to satisfy the investigation. But the immediate problem right now is the anger on the streets, which the rain, which the police, which community leaders don't seem to be. The situation here remains very volatile. There have been 15 injuries tonight, 12 to police officers. There have been 6 arrests for looting. It all began after an accident last night, a car accident in which a Hasidic man allegedly killed a 7-year-old black boy with his car. Later on, an Hasidic man was stabbed to death. Well, there were riots on and off throughout the day right now. The police about 2 hours ago pulled back from a perimeter area at President and Utica where most of that bottle throwing took place, and they are now in position away from that area right now. It is hoped that cooler heads will prevail.
A Hasidic driver struck and killed a young black child. Channel 2's Ren Scott reports.
For the second night in a row, the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn is in chaos. Hundreds of black teenagers are running through the streets, throwing rocks and bottles at police officers, attacking and flipping police cars, and setting fires. So far, at least 6 police officers have been injured, and dozens of people have been arrested, and there is no peace in sight. The violence stems from an accident here last night in which a car driven by a Hasidic man jumped a curb and struck 2 young black children, both 7 years old. One of the children died, the other is in critical condition. And tensions were heightened by reports from many people on the scene that the Hasidic ambulance company that arrived ignored the 2 black children lying on the ground to help the Hasidic driver.
They didn't take care of the children. They leave the children on the ground and take care of the drivers and the passengers from the car.
Almost immediately after the accident, violence broke out. Several blocks from the scene, a Hasidic man was brutally stabbed to death. Tonight, representatives of the Hasidic ambulance company involved say the charges are completely false. They say their driver was only following orders by police officers who saw trouble brewing.
He had looked in his mirror and seen 3 other emergency service buses, paramedic units arriving at the scene at the same time. He was then instructed by the police officer at the scene to take your people because they're being beat up, rescue them in the ambulance.
This afternoon, Deputy Mayor Bill Lynch met with black and Jewish leaders to try to resolve the problems in the community, but had no substantial progress to report. So the violence continues for one more night, and there's no easy solution in view. Tonight, the meetings between Jewish and black leaders continue, and members of the Human Rights Commission are...
Behind me, the situation here in Crown Heights still remains very tense. Hasidim have gathered outside of their headquarters. They say they're going to protect that building. They are concerned that the police protection is not heavy enough. And yet, as you can see, police are here out in strong force. They are here in riot gear.
Exploded after a black child was killed by an Hasidic driver Monday night. Within minutes, another innocent victim was killed. A young Hasidic man was stabbed to death. His funeral was held in Crown Heights today, as we hear now from Tim Fleischer.
Hoisted on the shoulders of fellow Hasidic men, the body of young Kel Rosenbaum was carried through the streets of Crown Heights, the same streets where this young Australian student was stabbed to death during the recent violence.
It is unfortunate that he himself was fell as a victim to that very same anti-Semitism that he was trying to fight.
That violence was sparked when a Hasidic man was involved in this accident, where a 7-year-old child was killed and his cousin seriously injured. Henya Lane and so many others caught in the middle, not fighting, yet struggling to understand the violence that has followed, that has taken a man's life.
Does that only inflame the situation when, as you claim, outsiders come into the...
Yes, they want to inflame it, and they inflame it. On our end, there is only peace. I'm telling you, I live here. I know. Our kids and everybody get along well.
And Eyewitness News has found that outsiders did appear last night, just prior to the violence that erupted. Here, police talked with activist Al Sharpton and Alton Maddox.
Because nobody's going to ask this crowd to relax under these circumstances.
But that doesn't help anything.
Well, I don't care what it helps. I'm just letting you know that.
I understand.
No. You got two people behind bars, and that's no funny thing.
Also, there are some now preparing to take matters into their own hands. Alton Maddox is looking to make a citizen's arrest of the Hasidic man who was involved in the accident.
We are going to organize a patrol to go into Crown Heights or wherever he is and bring him out.
But in Crown Heights, everyone now braces for the worst while police hope to keep the peace. Reporting from Crown Heights, Tim Fleischer, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Calls for calm in Crown Heights also come from Mayor Dinkins. He's in that neighborhood at this hour, talking with people in the community, hoping to keep the peace. Earlier today at City Hall, the mayor said his entire staff is working on ways to relieve the tension in that Crown Heights neighborhood.
There's a perception, of course, in both communities that the other community is better treated. And there may be, in some particulars, it may be that there's more than the perception. And that's what we've got to find out.
And a grand jury is investigating the car crash that sparked the violence. The driver of that car has not been charged.
The visit by the mayor to Crown Heights follows a violent night in that neighborhood. The anger that spilled into the streets has divided the community and touched the lives of many innocent people. David Navarro reports.
Crown Heights' night of violence began about 6 p.m. yesterday when an angry crowd of Hasidic Jews squared off against an equally angry crowd of blacks. The two groups hurled bottles and insults at each other outside the 71st precinct before a heavy rain temporarily cooled things off. But as darkness descended on the community, tensions flared back up. 3 stores were looted and 35 police officers were injured. But the violence touched civilians as well. This Hasidic man's son looked on in horror as his father bled into the street. An Eyewitness News reporter, Jim Dolan, spent the night at Kings County Hospital with cracked ribs and an enlarged spleen after a crowd of about 15 people turned on him. Dolan says he and his crew found themselves the target of an angry mob after a group of people firebombed a patrol car. Dolan says one of them, this man with the bicycle, confronted the news crew when he saw them videotaping the incident. The man screamed for the crews to turn off the camera, but Dolan says by the time they did, the situation had already escalated too far.
He started yelling, "Kill him, kill him," and a group of people who didn't know that we had been there all along assumed that this guy had a legitimate concern, a legitimate gripe with us, and they followed him and followed his instructions.
Dolan and the crew tried to run to the safety of their truck, but Dolan never made it.
They started punching me and kicking me.
Ironically, Dolan says it was the community itself that came to his rescue, residents who promised to watch his back if trouble erupted. They pulled the attackers off Dolan, allowing the news crew to escape, but not before the truck's windshield was smashed and its tire slashed. The crew pulled away driving on only their rims. When we returned today, we were unable to find anyone who witnessed the incident, but today Dolan says he owes his life to a handful of residents who kept their promise. Reporting from Crown Heights, David Navarro, Channel 7.
An untimely death on the streets of Crown Heights.
The Jewish community was not involved in the fight. The Jewish community was not involved in rioting. What happened here is a one-sided attack on the Jewish community.
The brief service ended in a procession through the streets of Crown Heights to the 71st precinct, and towards the end, a question for Mayor Dinkins.
I don't see Mayor Dinkins here this morning. I'd like to know why. I think a good number of the community would like to know why he's not here.
The Hasidim are asking for an end to this pain and suffering, and now that this funeral is over, there is still pain and suffering in other parts of this community. Some black people in front of the 71st precinct watching the procession still had strong views about black-Jewish relations and about the accident the other day which touched off the violence. There was a lengthy but peaceful exchange between the two groups.
About what? Are there any Hasidic punks? No, not me. Because you hold it in fact. No, because there are some Hasidic punks.
If everyone was peaceful and everyone was quiet and everything, they would have done their job and taken care of everybody on the scene.
Well, at least there was a dialogue, maybe a chance for some of the wounds to heal. Julian Phillips, News 4 News.
In the streets. 17 people were arrested, 35 police officers were hurt. The tension was sparked by the death of a 7-year-old boy who was hit by a car and killed Monday night. Today, another day of pain, another day of healing. One victim of violence is laid to rest, and Mayor Dinkins tries to heal the city's wounds. Tim Minton is here now, and he has the full story of Crown Heights. Tim?
Bill, the mayor's navigating an emotional obstacle course. He said today that Crown Heights passions are so strong, even a dispute over a parking space could have set off that community. He said he's assigned virtually his entire staff to calm the hatred. The first sounds of afternoon diplomacy came from a motorcade carrying Police Commissioner Lee Brown. Rushing to a meeting with Jewish leaders, he passed rows of riot officers on standby. More cops watched from rooftops that served last night as launching pads for rocks and bottles. Nearby, where racial violence was triggered when 2 children were accidentally run down by a Hasidic driver, this afternoon there was uneasy calm. At City Hall earlier, Commissioner Brown gave the first official signal that one major point of tension may soon be eliminated. Relatives of the young victims have joined black activists to demand that the station wagon driver be arrested. The commissioner announced that a grand jury will immediately review evidence.
And there are clear indications that the person may have gone through a red light. Keeping in mind what we said earlier, that there were 3 cars in the caravan, 2 went ahead, 1 lagged behind for whatever reason. Some say he's talking on the telephone, and then appears to be an attempt to catch up.
Meanwhile, Hasidic residents today buried a Jewish visitor from Australia. Yankel Rosenbaum was stabbed to death shortly after the car accident in what many Hasidim claim was a revenge murder. It left both Jews and blacks demanding more police protection, both claiming the other groups treated better. And a mayor elected in part for his ability to heal, trying to put out the fires of hate.
Where there's a perception and it's inaccurate, we need to correct it and get the word out as to what's accurate. And where there are things that are inequitably, services inequitably delivered or whatever, we got to address that.
And he and his top officials continue to plead for calm today, but despite that, the police say they will have, once again, hundreds of officers in Crown Heights on duty tonight, hoping against a repeat of what happened the last 2 nights, but prepared nevertheless.
Hundreds of black protesters began throwing bottles and rocks outside the world headquarters of the Lubavitcher sect of Hasidic Jews. They also attacked press cars and vans, smashing windows and cutting tires. One Channel 2 news crew came under attack by a group throwing bottles and rocks, and a Channel 2 cameraman was hurt in the melee, and several police officers were injured. Right now, police in riot gear are trying to restore order.
This is the 3rd day of racial violence in that neighborhood, and now Mayor Dinkins is in the area making a personal plea for peace. Correspondent Chris Borgen reports live now from that neighborhood, torn by bloodshed between blacks, Jews, and the police. Chris.
Jim, Mayor Dinkins arrived just moments after that onslaught, that vicious onslaught of rock, bottle, and brick throwing, which erupted here this afternoon. An eruption of violence which is far different from this morning, which began on a more solemn note. 500 members of the Hasidic community massed in front of their headquarters on Eastern Parkway this morning. The prayers and funeral for 29-year-old Yankel Yaakov Rosenbaum, a yeshiva student from Australia who was stabbed to death on Monday night in what police call a retaliation for the death of 7-year-old Kevin Kato, struck down, along with his 7-year-old cousin, by a van driven by a 22-year-old member of the Hasidic community. The death of the 7-year-old led to 2 nights of violence in the community, where blacks burned cars, looted shops, and broke windows of Jewish homes. There were those in the Jewish community who insisted the problem was not between blacks and Jews, but the result of agitation by outside elements.
People from outside the community, within the cloak of clergy, that are inciting and working hard to increase the tension going on here in the community.
This afternoon, Mayor Dinkins met with the Cato family and members of the black community, who insisted the community was angry that the Hasidic driver of the van had never been charged in the death of 7-year-old Kevin or the injury sustained by Kevin's 7-year-old cousin, Angela.
The matter now is before a grand jury, and the determination as to what happened, such as whether the person ran through a red light, such as if there are other violations, such as what charges should, if any, should be made in this case, will be handled as a result of that process.
The city of New York has 72 hours to have yourself, listself, behind bars. If he is not behind bars in 72 hours, we are going to organize a patrol to go into Crown Heights or wherever he is and bring him out, exercising our right to citizens' arrest.
So this afternoon at 5 o'clock, Mayor Dinkins was expected to come here to PS 167 and here talk to members of both the Hasidic and the black community in the hope of, well, reconciling the differences and bringing peace back to the neighborhood. That peace was torn suddenly with an outbreak of violence. That violence continues. Live from Brooklyn, I'm Chris Borgen, Channel 2 News, back to you in the studio.
Chris, it was your vehicle that was attacked and your cameraman who was hurt. How badly injured was he?
Manny was hit in the in the right rib cage. He may have broken a rib. They're now taking him back to the hospital for X-rays. To give you an idea of the types of rocks that were thrown, I have 3 items in my hand, and these are the smallest of the rocks in question. They're called handheld sizes.
Were you just a target of convenience, opportunity?
Well, as you can well appreciate, the media trucks themselves are both obvious, large, and with their transmitters up in the air, they make inviting targets. And yes, we were invited to targets, and everyone took dead aim. The truck, the windows, the side windows, and the camera personnel were all targets for these rock and bottle throwers.
Did other cameras pull out as a result of the attack on yours?
Yes, Larry Yampolsky, a cameraman formerly with Channel 2 News and now with Channel 4, was injured quite severely. He was hit in the head. He's now gone to the hospital for some stitches and a CAT scan. He was quite seriously injured. And 2 other cameramen were also hurt. 3 police officers, in our view, went down, 2 with apparent fractured legs. X-ray will prove that. Mayor Dinkins arrived moments afterwards, spoke to all of those who were injured in the school yard itself, especially to Manny, and hoped that they would get better, and of course would be treated.
So did the rocks come from all directions at one time?
No, what happened was a group which began 3 blocks away, about 150 strong, began to march down Eastern Parkway. They swelled to about 400 as they approached the school itself, and this phalanx of media vans. They began to unleash rocks, bottles, and bricks. An arsenal came out of that crowd, began to bang against the trucks, began to, of course, hit the cameramen and the cameras and the police officers themselves. Everyone took safety inside of the schoolhouse until they passed.
Well, I'm sure the injured are getting proper care and will soon be back to duty, and I'm glad you're all right, Chris.
Thank you.
And take good care. Thank you.
Chris mentioned Mayor Dinkins, and the Crown Heights crisis is a major test for the Dinkins administration. Channel 2's Marcia Kramer reports from City Hall on how the mayor is handling the situation.
As tragic as the Crown Heights affair is, it could well turn out to be the defining event of the Dinkins administration. And the actions taken by the mayor here could well make or break his political future.
I personally believe that Dinkins is a decent man who would like to stop this. But by nature, he's not the kind of person to step in and say, enough's enough. He doesn't get mad. And sometimes getting mad is an appropriate reaction for a mayor.
But Mayor Dinkins did get mad today. Not at the disturbances in Crown Heights, but over criticism that he did not attend this morning's funeral of Yankel Rosenbaum, but does in fact have plans to attend next week's funeral of the young black boy also killed on Monday. Dinkins angrily pointed out he visited Rosenbaum in the hospital before he died.
What did he say to you? Did you touch him? Did you hold his hand? Not a question like that. Not one, but I did. Ask Rabbi Spielman. I held his hand, he held mine, he looked up in my eyes, I looked at him, we talked to one another. He's dead now. And so now I'm being obliquely criticized for not having attended his funeral. The compassion and concern was demonstrated. And the fact that I was not there at 8 o'clock this morning in no way diminishes the concern that I have.
The problem for Dinkins, according to many political observers, is that he's not always acted as decisively as he should have. The boycott by blacks of 2 Korean fruit stands in Brooklyn dragged on for months because he didn't want to offend either side. Critics fear he'll do the same thing here.
I think he's in a situation now where he can make a fresh start or a fresh direction. If he misses it, he may miss it for the next 2 years.
A success could help him regain the confidence of voters who counted on Dinkins.
Standing by live now, Tim.
With Deborah, Sheila, it has been a day and night of screaming sirens so far. 35 people have been injured, 17 of them police officers, and we've just learned in the last 45 minutes that 2 cops were shot on Schenectady Avenue, not badly hurt, taken to Kings County Hospital, and within the last 2 hours, 1 person was killed.
And Tim, the mayor and the police commissioner themselves became under siege when we all were trapped in a school building where community and city leaders were meeting. A mob of about 150 angry people stormed its way up Eastern Parkway towards the school building. Violence exploded as the mob spotted news vans, forcing the media inside the building. Four officers were hurt. They were hit with rocks and glass. News van windows smashed out. The mob yelling their anger with the mayor. It was a total contrast to the Hasidic community's solemn funeral march this morning. Mourners carried the coffin of 29-year-old Yankel Rosenbaum to the 71st precinct, where they called for more police protection. Rosenbaum, an apparent innocent bystander, was stabbed to death in retaliation. All this rampage began Monday when an Hasidic driver jumped a street curb, killing one 7-year-old black child and seriously injuring another. Last night, riots exploded, blacks against Hasidim. Today, Crown Heights is a neighborhood broken in pieces like the shattered glass covering sidewalks. Immigrants whose businesses were trashed, looted, and destroyed hold back tears and ask why.
I don't know who to blame. No, I don't know. We are just a victim, I guess, you know.
Many of the owners of the businesses that were spared any damage decided not to open up today. Police blanket every street. It is a neighborhood under siege.
A grand jury is investigating the accident that started all this. Meanwhile, the Reverend Al Sharpton and Alton Maddox are demanding the arrest of the Hasidic driver. They say if he's not arrested, they will hunt him down themselves.
And it was that demand that the police commissioner and the mayor together were handed when they faced crowds out here in Crown Heights this afternoon together, a place with very unique problems in this city, and it was a very combative visit. It's angry and ugly, and it's dangerous. An Hasidic man hit by a brick on Eastern Parkway. A cop assigned today to protect the mayor suffers a fractured leg. People who observed the attack taunting him as he's wheeled to an ambulance.
You reap what you sow. What goes around comes around.
Two dramatically different cultures on a collision course. Crown Heights, where a large proportion of the 300,000 residents are blacks of Caribbean descent, sharing sidewalks and apartment buildings with Hasidic Jews, Orthodox people whose origins are in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. A relationship soured by resentment and suspicion over the years, now pushed all the way to physical confrontation. 3 nights of it. But who started it? And why has it gotten this far?
I believe this is from the outside. Most people are homeowners. I don't believe it's definitely not from the inside. I've been here 10 years, and basically people coincide together.
This is our time. This is our time. You know, for a long time, man, you said walk in, you know what I'm saying? But when the jogger got ripped in Central Park, you know what I'm saying, it was a different story. This is our time. This is us.
Because passions are running so high, there is no way the community can yet come together. The mayor today sought to diffuse the tension by talking to young people, and he took some heat.
I myself personally worked hard on your campaign, and I'm right now just I don't know what to say. All right, I'm like real sorry that I did it.
I have been here, and I'm surprised that not one of you would say, "Oh, but he's been here." I'm surprised that not one of you. You ought to know it, and it's unfair for you to get on the media and say the mayor ought to come here.
Surrounded by extremely heavy security, the mayor then confronted and talked to the crowd who earlier had thrown bricks and rocks and bottles at the building where he was talking to the young people.
I too want justice. We all want justice. And we will have justice.
Police Commissioner Lee Brown, who spent much of this day in Crown Heights, just left the 71st Precinct from where he monitored a very active day out here. We have some footage just in. Our cameraman, John Frazzi, was just over at the Utica Avenue area where much of the turmoil has been in the last few days. And as you can see, the police still chasing down people who are throwing bottles and rocks. It's still a very rough evening over in that part of Crown Heights.
EMS and news vans have to travel throughout the neighborhood with their windows taped. It is not a safe neighborhood. It is very dangerous out here tonight.
And the media has been targets as well as the police. Of course, the breaking story right now is that we have reports of 2 police officers who have been shot. That happened on Schenectady Avenue. They were apparently hit by pellets. We'll try to update for that a little bit later on. They're probably okay. They were taken to Kings County Hospital, but someone with a gun, perhaps a pellet gun, is on top of a building over at Schenectady Avenue firing at will. Police trying to chase him down. So that is the scene from here. Another combative night of turmoil in Crown Heights. You can hear the sirens, ambulances going by, police cars everywhere. Something of a madhouse out here. Back to you guys.
Tim and Deborah, it doesn't seem to be a very safe neighborhood for anyone tonight. What do you get the sense of in terms of people who are living there? Are they just in their homes? What is going on right now?
Some of the people are very scared. They're very terrified. Others are out looking around, just sort of watching the action, watching and waiting to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, and Deborah, in your story, there was a man actually sobbing, a store owner. So there's been a lot of businesses looted as well, and there's been a tremendous economic impact. And it was a good question because there are a lot of very innocent people involved in this who are being hurt every moment of it.
The mayor certainly seemed angry in his discussion with the groups out there, and he is determined to defuse this situation. What efforts are being made by the mayor and his office to bring calm to this situation?
Well, Tim, in covering him all throughout the day, he and the police commissioner, they are starting their meetings. They started them right this afternoon, as you saw, and they will continue those meetings with both the Jewish leaders and the black community leaders, and they're hoping they can change the perceptions of the things going on in this community.
Yeah, in years of covering New York City, I've never seen so many police in one spot. I've also never seen so many people with community relations jackets on. They've brought in just about everybody to try to have clear...
For an update, let's go live to Tim Malloy and Deborah Quintana.
Marvin, lots of fast-breaking developments happening in this very tense situation. 35 police officers have been injured. None, we're told, have been serious. Tim, you just came back from the neighborhoods.
Right, we were about 10 blocks from here. 8 of those cops who were injured were hit, shot by shotgun pellets tonight. Shot from a rooftop here on Empire in Schenectady. The police, you're looking at them looking for apparently a sniper on a roof. A number of police deployed there. Something of a war zone out in that area.
You're looking at one of several police cars that have been overturned, burned, or wrecked in the last several days. No one is immune from the violence. EMS vehicles have had bricks thrown at them, and one Newsday reporter was cornered and beaten, we're told.
He wasn't the first reporter to be beaten up in the last 3 days. Helicopters hovering overhead, looking apparently for that sniper, as well as for people who have been throwing things, bottles and rocks, from rooftops.
Lots of people caught in the crossfire here. You want to see an eerie sight. Take a look over my shoulder here. There are dozens and dozens of EMS vehicles waiting to be deployed. Many have been back and forth.
Days of racial violence. Tonight, 8 police officers were hurt by shotgun pellets fired by protesters. In all, 43 officers and at least 20 civilians were hurt in tonight's clashes, and 27 people have been arrested. And now the mayor is asking the media to allow him to talk to the people of New York, and especially to those in Crown Heights, to try to calm things down. Earlier tonight, protesters pulled a cab driver out of his cab and then set the car on fire. It's all because of a traffic accident Monday night that turned Jews and blacks against each other, and the confrontation has gone on for 3 days. Kathy Wolf is here now to show us more of what's happened tonight.
Well, Susan, Mayor Dinkins did his best to show his concern for the problems in Crown Heights tonight, but the situation is still volatile, and his appearance in Crown Heights didn't seem to help. He began by speaking to a group of young people at PS 167 on Eastern Parkway, just blocks from where the trouble began. They were high schoolers, student leaders, and Mayor Dinkins met with them to find out how to calm tension in Crown Heights, and also to reassure them that he cares.
I don't have to be here. I could sit the police commissioner and 4 deputy mayors. I could sit at City Hall or Gracie Mansion. I'm here because I care.
It all started Monday when Angela and Gavin Cato were hit by a car. The driver, an Hasidic Jew, was not badly injured, but one child died. The other is in critical condition. The private ambulance service Hatzalah took the Jewish driver and passengers. EMS tended to the children. Tonight, Police Commissioner Lee Brown tried to dispel the rumor that the Jewish ambulance ignored the dying children.
At the time that the driver was taken away by the private ambulance, we had city paramedics there taking care of the children.
But people in Crown Heights didn't know that Monday night, and in revenge, 29-year-old Yankel Rosenbaum was stabbed to death. The funeral for the Jewish student was held today. 2 people have been charged with his murder. Tonight, the students wanted to know why the driver who hit the children was not arrested. The mayor explained that the evidence is being presented to a grand jury.
I'm not able to go out there and say this man who's driving this car is going to be arrested tonight. I can't say that.
As the mayor spoke, the chaos continued outside. At least 15 officers were injured in skirmishes in the streets. The windows of a police van were smashed. The mayor was going to walk the streets, but in the end decided against it. Instead, he spoke to a crowd from the school steps and was booed. After the mayor left, I spoke to some teenagers who live in Crown Heights.
If they'd arrested the Jew that did it for like that, then everybody would have been happy.
As the mayor and the police commissioner pointed out, the only thing the Hasidic driver can be charged with at the moment is running the red light. A grand jury will have to decide if any further charges are warranted. Bill and Susan.
Thank you, Kathy, very much. The volatile situation in Crown Heights is prompting a dramatic response from the mayor. Within the hour, Mayor Dinkins has asked New York City's TV stations for airtime to try to bring calm to that community. To that end, Sarah Wallace joins us live now with the mayor. Sarah?
Well, Bill, I'm standing with the mayor, who is on his way to Kings County Hospital to visit those injured officers. You saw that videotape. It's very dramatic tape tonight of yourself being booed, the mayor of the city. I think a lot of people are wondering, can you...
I didn't need to see the tape. I was there. I think what's important to understand is that emotions run very high. A child is dead. Some people with misinformation, as you correctly point out, believe that it was caused by intent, and that the children injured, the one who died and the other, did not receive attention while others did. And I think they now begin to know the facts. For a while tonight, or this afternoon, at the school, the rumor circulated that young Angela had died. She has not. She's in stable condition. I went out there to demonstrate my concern for the community. Not just for the African-American community, but for the total community.
But you were booed, and I think a lot of people are wondering, what extraordinary measures are you going to take to ensure that there's control in this city? A lot of people are worried.
Let us be clear. The problem now is not whether or not they applaud the mayor or boo the mayor. What's important is that they understand that there is concern, and that they understand that under no circumstances am I going to tolerate lawlessness and violence. Under no circumstances. I understand you want to know about outside agitators. There has been the suggestion by many that some of the persons there that are instigating and causing or perhaps doing the throwing, but suggesting that others throw rocks and bottles are outside agitators. As I went to visit the Cato family, bottles were thrown as I entered the building, came perilously close to striking me. That's not acceptable behavior, no matter what the provocation, and we're not going to tolerate it.
And what are you going to do about that?
I'm going to see the police commissioner now as I go out to Kings County Hospital to visit the injured officers. And the police commissioner is at the 7-1 precinct. He'll meet me at the hospital, wherein he and I will have a brief meeting with the Deputy Mayor Milton Mullen about the fashion in which we ought to address some of these kinds of problems.
And you believe that there can be control maintained in this city?
There is no question that control can be maintained in this city. Absolutely.
All right, Mayor Dinkins.
Precinct in Crown Heights with more. Sarah?
The police commissioner denied to reporters this afternoon that the situation here has gotten out of control, but he did tell us that, quote, an escalation in lawlessness has forced them to implement a new get tough strategy. The 71st precinct that you can see here is just one major staging area for police. You might also see, by the way, that a number of officers have put masking tape on the windshields of their police cars to prevent those windshields from shattering. But this police presence is just a small fraction of what's out in Crown Heights tonight. Crown Heights looks like it's been swept by a wave of blue. The commissioner won't give out specific numbers of officers added today, but we found one inspector who was dealing with just footpost officers in one particular area. How many folks are you dealing with today? What
a couple of hundred in this area.
Enough. You think there's going to be enough? The strategy also includes more police and vehicles, motorcycle units, and mounted patrol officers. And the commissioner made it clear that while lawful demonstrations will be allowed, there are new limits.
But we will certainly be prepared to restrict the area in which they demonstrate in order to control the unlawfulness. We know that many of the people who've come together over the last couple of days have not participated in lawful demonstrations. As we gather our intelligence, we see that happening we are prepared to break up the gatherings.
And while 60 people were arrested yesterday for violence, the police commissioner indicated they are prepared to make mass arrests. Mobile arrest vans have been placed in the field for speedy processing, and the district attorney and courts notified to expect a big influx. By the way, the head of the police union is complaining that his officers, have not been allowed to adequately defend themselves in what he is calling this state of siege. More on his strongly worded recommendations tonight at 6 o'clock. Live from Crown Heights, Sarah Wallace, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
And while the police crack down on the violence, they also look for the instigators. Crown Heights residents say it's outside forces, people from other neighborhoods who are stirring up the trouble. Tim Fleischer has that story.
It did not take long for this crowd to grow in size Monday night, and with it an apparent anger.
Let's not get busy one night. This is a long fight.
Activist Reverend Al Sharpton and Alton Maddox had come in from outside the Crown Heights community, following an accident where a 7-year-old boy was killed and his cousin critically injured after being run down by this car driven by a Hasidic man. Also in Crown Heights Monday night, as violence was breaking out, was Sonny Carson, who some have called a leader in the black community.
It was appropriate for me to show.
He sees himself, though, as a former Crown Heights resident and concerned citizen, but does not think it was appropriate for him to speak out against this violence.
It's appropriate for me not to allow myself to be placed in a position where I have to calm our people down when we are the victims of the attacks.
A lot will depend on what Sonny Carson and Al Maddox and others have to say. If they're out suggesting calm and the like, then that can be helpful.
As people hurled rocks and bottles and police moved in to try and control the fighting, even this ranking officer, as revealed in this videotape, could not convince activist Alton Maddox and Reverend Sharpton to calm this violence.
Because nobody's going to ask this crowd to relax under these circumstances.
But that doesn't help anything.
Well, I don't care what it helps.
Still, others believe that if calm is to return to these streets here in Crown Heights, it is going to take help from outsiders, help that will bring all of the people together.
Your paths cross constantly, so it is in the best interest of the community for all of the leaders to be willing to sit down and work together.
And as a first step, they say, to stop the violence. Reporting from Crown Heights, Tim Fleischer, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
And Mayor David Dinkins has called back the vacationing Brooklyn district attorney to speed up the legal process in Crown Heights. As Art McFarland tells us, residents there want justice, and they want it now.
At President Street and Utica Avenue in Crown Heights, a police barricade was put up today. This is the block where the incident occurred that has turned Crown Heights into a tinderbox of violence and racial hatred.
The Jews been trying to pull the black people out of the neighborhood in Crown Heights. They don't like the black people in Crown Heights. I don't know why.
Police say black residents asked for the barricade today because every fender-bender car accident that has happened here since Monday's fatal accident has brought the threat of more violence. And especially in the black sections of Crown Heights, there is a sense of outrage over the fact that the Hasidic driver of the car that struck the children has not been charged with any crimes.
If someone commit a crime, they should be arrested and charged. Because, first of all, he committed 2 crimes. He ran the light and killed one and injured another. That's 2 crimes in one.
Law enforcement sources tell Eyewitness News that pending a grand jury investigation, the Hasidic driver, Yosef Lisef, could face several possible charges, including criminally negligent homicide or the lesser charge of reckless endangerment. A further charge of driving while intoxicated is also possible. And here is why Lisef has not been charged so far in the case. As the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office told us today, it has to be proven that he was either speeding or intoxicated at the time of the accident. The DA's office says that under New York state law, just losing control of a car by itself is not criminal negligence under the law. Police Commissioner Lee Brown today told our Sarah Wallace why authorities did not automatically arrest Yosef Lisef.
Even if there was evidence that he went through the red light, that is not grounds for an arrest under that circumstance, under New York state law.
Why, Commissioner? Can you explain that?
Essentially for vehicular homicides, you have to have gross negligence in more than one case.
There are those who would have peace in this community who might wonder when the conflict will ever end. And there are those who say the problems will continue at least
Cracking down hard. Our Ed Miller is standing by now live. Ed, what can you tell us about the situation?
Jewish leaders are calling for the National Guard to be put on alert here to try to get a handle on the continuing violence in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. But the mayor and the governor are reluctant to do that. Instead, they're trying to solve the racial fighting here by putting 1,000 policemen in the neighborhood and instructing them to get tough. Waves of police rolled through the riot-torn streets of Crown Heights tonight with a new attitude and a new toughness, a promise to arrest troublemakers as soon as they start throwing bottles or looting. At least 9 were arrested and at least 1 policeman injured. Other black protesters, keenly aware of this new Get Tough policy, seem to be controlling their anger to hateful shouting. Here, ringleaders threatening to beat up television reporters, viewing them as the enemy. Those same ringleaders then whipped the crowd into a frenzy, marching to the headquarters of the Jewish Lubavitch sect on Eastern Parkway.
Too strong, too strong, too strong, too strong.
Criticism has been building for several days over why police have allowed angry gangs to run wild into the streets, throwing rocks and bottles, inciting violence, and yet not being arrested. Many have accused police brass of mishandling the situation, of being too cautious, too lenient, and of hardly arresting anyone. The Patrolmen Benevolent Association urges police to use their nightsticks and guns if necessary. They are not to serve as lame sitting ducks. They need not retreat and cower in fear. Senator Al D'Amato putting it even stronger, calling on the Justice Department to conduct a full-scale investigation into who exactly is inciting the violence, and for officials to take the shackles off police. Quote, "The rule of law must prevail, not mob rule. There is only one place for violent rioters: behind bars." Now, despite that, some blacks still accuse police of being biased against them over the past couple of days. Now, we do have an update for you on the situation here tonight. Earlier, we told you 9 arrests. There have been at least 12 arrests, and 2 policemen were injured here in Crown Heights, Brooklyn tonight. Right now, the situation is that there are many small groups. That one group, a large group that we followed earlier this evening at about 9 o'clock, has now broken up into many small groups. They seem to be milling about, and for the time being, the rock and bottle throwing has stopped, and it is quiet in Crown Heights as of now, and we will update you if the situation warrants. Reporting live from Crown Heights, Brooklyn, I'm Ed Miller. Back to you.
Okay, Ed, thank you very much. And fueling the fire in Crown Heights is the fact that the Hasidic driver who ran down the 2 children was never arrested. Black leaders say they'll march on his home this Saturday to make a citizen's arrest.
Somebody's going to be taken out of Crown Heights in handcuffs.
And you're saying you're
going to be taken. I'm going straight into Crown Heights on Saturday, and we're going to arrest whoever was involved in this, and you can meet us down at the precinct to check out the booking of those suspects.
Maddox and others say the driver should be charged with criminally negligent homicide, speeding, and leaving the scene of an accident. Police say the driver, Yosef Lipsa, did not leave the scene on his own accord. A chronology of that tragic night shows police ordered the volunteer Hasidic ambulance to take him away because the crowd was threatening his life. The Hasidic ambulance has faced heavy criticism for being first on the scene but not treating the fallen children. The ambulance driver claiming he arrived at the same time as EMS, and the children were already being treated. But both police and EMS report the volunteer ambulance already on the scene when they arrived. And with all eyes focused on Crown Heights, the question still remains, how did this community become such a hotbed of racial tension? Deborah Quintana takes a look.
These are the brutal images we've come to know as Crown Heights. It is a raw and ugly anger. But this too is Crown Heights. Stately homes, neatly kept apartment buildings where blacks and Jews live and shop in harmony. But there is a history of friction that runs long and deep. For more than 40 years, it's been the home of the Orthodox Hasidic sect known as Lubavitch. It's also a neighborhood that's become 80% black. It is a fragile balance of people reluctant to learn how each other lives and thinks. Hate is unleashed at the site where the Hasidic driver ran down a young black child. Tension erupts on every corner. The Jewish community says police are not doing enough and blame outsiders like the Reverend Al Sharpton for inciting tension. Blacks say police show favoritism towards the Hasidic community.
There has to be one standard for whites and blacks, not one for the whites and another for the blacks.
It's definitely outsiders. I just spoke to a black man today from Bed-Stuy who told me that he himself was approached from Bed-Stuy. He doesn't live in this neighborhood, and they asked him to come into Crown Heights and go looting.
What will end this racial division?
We need to share. We need to know how to tell our children about playing with one another, regardless of the color, the creed, the race, whatever.
A man who clearly sees both sides, a black Hasidic Jew, has his own insight.
People who have the gift of articulation is not articulating, and those who are articulating are sending the wrong message.
Whatever the solutions are, putting politics and neighborhood rage aside, for one family there is only one tragic task: burying their 7-year-old child. Gavin Cato's funeral has been postponed until early next week. In Crown Heights, Deborah Quintana, Channel 11 News at 10.
Mayor Dinkins returned to the troubled community today after ordering a police crackdown. Argylin Thompson reports the mayor is promising to restore the peace.
Yesterday, he was dodging bottles and had to be escorted out of Crown Heights as the crowd shouted the mayor isn't safe. But today, a defiant David Dinkins returned to a noticeably quiet Crown Heights, talking tough about cracking down on the violence.
The police department is going to enforce the law. They must enforce the law, and they must enforce it even-handedly. Even-handedly. Same treatment for all communities.
Dinkins told this crowd that District Attorney Charles Hines is returning early from vacation to personally handle the grand jury investigation of the death and serious injury of 2 young black children when they were struck by a van driven by an Hasidic driver on Monday night. Dinkins, the city's first black mayor and the man in the middle in this racial crisis, has been criticized for failing to take a strong stand. Hasidic Jews wanting peace and more arrests of demonstrators, blacks wanting the driver arrested.
Words and words only will not do it. We need actions, we need respect, and we need to be treated fairly.
We feel that the insurance that we received this morning, that the mayor has changed his policies and the police will get tougher, we feel that that assurance will be carried out, and we feel confident with that.
Okay, so you're happy with how he's handling this at this point?
Yes, but the proof is in the pudding.
Dinkins huddled earlier in the day with Governor Cuomo, who could authorize the use of the National Guard to restore calm. But Dinkins and the governor agreed that the use of the Guard would not be necessary despite several nights of violence, instead relying on increased police presence.
No matter who marches in the streets, no matter how provoked they believe they are, they do not have the right to damage property, to hurt individuals who are innocent, period.
As the mayor got tough today, he also uttered some familiar words, heard several times now during his troubled administration. Quote, "I need all the help I can get." In these troubled times here in Crown Heights, few would doubt the truth of that statement. In Brooklyn, I'm Glenn Thompson, Channel 11 News at 10.
Columnist Jimmy Breslin styles himself a man of the street, a voice of the voiceless masses. Last night, he went into Crown Heights and promptly got stripped, beaten, and robbed. Rosemary Gomez picks up the story.
Through the back doors, the alleyways, to the hidden corners of the city, he finds a story where other people wouldn't think to look.
Jimmy Breslin has been described as the quintessential New York reporter. But last night, the columnist who covers the city every day got caught up in the violence of Crown Heights. He was beaten up by a group of angry teenagers who left him with nothing but his shorts and a press pass.
We have raised every 13 or 14 years or so a generation of people, young people, who don't make it.
Breslin, who covered his share of riots in the past, doesn't believe the Brooklyn riots are racially motivated. Instead, he considers it a matter of economics.
They do not have a job now, and the chances are they will never have a job.
The Newsday columnist decided to take a ride to Crown Heights after watching violence on the streets of Moscow. But now Soviet politics somehow seems pale by comparison.
It didn't register on anybody. The danger of having all these people not going anywhere in the world. Much more dangerous thing to us than anything in Russia.
Breslin says the attack hasn't disillusioned him about the city, but he thinks the problem is beyond the mayor or the governor's control, and that it's time for the federal government to lend a helping hand.
As there is no power on earth to match the power of the poor, I submit to you they can take this city down. No question about it.
Breslin claims this incident won't change the way he approaches a story.
And events there have only heated up bitter feelings. But tonight, several groups got together to try to resolve differences through talk and understanding.
Police units stepped off in Newark this afternoon. This was a unity parade protesting racism in America. The National Black Police Officers Association is holding its convention in Newark, and one of their biggest concerns this week has been Crown Heights.
And we still have scars of the riots of 1867. I'm appalled by what's happening in Crown Heights in New York City.
At the same time in Bergen County, there was an anti-racism rally. The concerns of many of the people here, Crown Heights.
We're living in very difficult economic times. It makes people assume the worst about each other and blame others for problems which may be their own or problems which may belong to no one.
This is not a black against white thing, because there are good people in the black community as well as there are bad. There are good people in a white community as well as bad. There is not one that's better than the other.
In Newark, the parade ended at a Baptist church where there were prayers for peace and harmony. At the New Milford Jewish Center, there were also prayers, and many of the people in attendance who were not Jewish expressed concerns felt by everyone, a desire for respect. Last month, these remarks were made by Professor Leonard Jeffries of City College of New York.
Russian Jewry had a particular control over the movies. And their financial partners, the mafia, put together a system of destruction of black people.
I get offended every time I hear the word mafia, and it seems that you use that word as a catch-all and you're always tying in Italian Americans.
So tonight, people came together in an effort to bring more people together.
I just believe that it's time for the president to talk about black and whites, suburban and urban coming together.
And tomorrow, black and Jewish religious leaders are to meet on the steps of City Hall for another rally. And they say they will call for an end to violence.
And they moved the protesters, numbering about 200, toward the west. Throughout the evening, the band of protesters has been roving the neighborhood, accompanied by police in riot gear, who've been trying to disperse the angry crowd. Earlier today, Mayor Dinkins and Borough President Howard Golden were here in Crown Heights, attempting to calm down the neighborhood, and my colleague Eric Shawn was there.
There has been death and there has been pain.
Yes,
and that lawlessness and violence is not the answer to our problem.
The day after he was denounced by protesters, Mayor Dinkins was back on the racially troubled streets of Crown Heights to preach peace. He stood briefly on a crumbled brick wall in a neighborhood turned into an ugly urban battleground by 3 nights of riots as black teens clashed with the civic Jews, the protesters throwing rocks and bottles, sparing neither police, reporters, nor residents from their mindless fury. A police officer was hit by shotgun pellets. Stores were burned and looted. The mayor's message is cool it, but one spectator standing nearby was not satisfied.
Our police department is quite capable of handling this situation, and they will.
All right. For who? Benefit who?
The question of even-handedly.
Even-handedly what? I was sitting here last night. And don't tell me, Tony.
It's good that the mayor came. I don't see anything bad coming out of it. I'm happy that he came.
It means nothing to me. Actions is what we want.
The more the blacks and the Jews do together will help our complete relationship between the black and Jewish community.
I'm glad that these people are out here sticking together, because if we don't come out here and show what we demand, what we need in our community, nothing will never happen for us.
As police promise a crackdown and consider a curfew, the parents of Gavin Cato, the 7-year-old accidentally run down by the acidic car Monday night, are demanding the driver's arrest. They have retained activist lawyer Alton Maddox, C. Vernon Mason, and Colin Moore, veterans of our city's racial strife. They and others vowed to return to these streets for more protests this weekend, a prospect City Hall has tried to defuse.
Is it your view that protest leaders are trying to incite this violence to perhaps divide the city?
I think some perhaps are, because there's at least some evidence that some people sort of convene folks and then disappear when the bricks and bottles start to fly. So clearly, if it can be determined that some people are inciting the riot, then they'll be dealt with.
Clearly, Crown Heights remains on edge. With even more marches planned for this weekend and the boy's funeral set for Monday,
The challenge for our city's first black mayor is to prove this city, not mob rule, controls the streets. It may be the most crucial test the Dinkins administration ever has to face. In Crown Heights, Brooklyn, I'm Eric Shawn, Fox 5 News.
Back live now at the 71st Precinct to recap a fourth night of racial unrest, but the situation not quite as bad as in past nights. Reporting live from Brooklyn, this is Jeff Weiser, Fox 5 News. Now back to the studio.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. The racial tensions in Brooklyn have spilled over into the streets of...
Officers have been hurt. 23 people have been arrested during a march to the local precinct. But there are a lot of police there tonight, and Crown Heights is not nearly so dangerous nor so violent as it's been since a plague of racial hatred broke out Monday night after a young black boy and an Hasidic Jew from Australia were killed. Tappy Phillips picks up the story now, and she's live at the 71st Precinct. Tappy, good evening.
And, Bill, police are trying to keep a lid on the violence through sheer force and numbers. And as you said, it has been quieter here tonight than any other night since Monday when Gavin Cato was killed, and the long-standing animosities in this community erupted in violence. The mayor and police commissioner had ordered a saturation of the neighborhood with police tonight and were prepared for large-scale arrests. So far, there were 23 arrests, 4 police officers hit with bricks and rocks, suffering minor injuries. A helicopter made frequent passes overhead looking for troublemakers, and there were groups of police in riot gear on many corners. At the Bible Faith Tabernacle on St. John's Place, there was memorial service for Gavin Cato as religious leaders tried to prevent further violence.
If we would come together as one and pray with the community and try to understand the situation, we can stop the turmoil that's happening in the city.
Tonight, officers at the 71st Precinct fortified for possible problems. All day today, the mayor, the police commissioner, and politicians tried to reduce tensions in Crown Heights. The mayor returned here to try to keep a lid on violence and called on every responsible member of the community to help.
The parents that are not saying to their children, you stay home and you stay out of that. And yes, we have grievances, but this is not the answer. Violence is never the answer.
Well, of the 23 arrests tonight, 5 were men traveling in a car carrying pellet guns. The rest were for unlawful assembly. Now, the mayor says he has considered imposing a curfew in this neighborhood, but he'll wait and see if this massive police presence works. We won't know if it's successful until the night is over. We're live at the 7-1 Precinct in Brooklyn. Tappy Phillips, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
And some questions and answers tonight about the situation in Crown Heights. Questions people ask and local leaders have to answer. Question, will the National Guard be called in to end the violence? Answer, that decision is up to Governor Cuomo, who says the mayor has not yet asked for that assistance. Will there be a curfew? Mayor Dinkins says no. Will the Hasidic driver allegedly responsible for the death of the black child be charged with criminal wrongdoing? That's
orders to keep the peace. Sarah Wallace has this story from the local precinct in Crown Heights.
Well, Diana, tonight, cops here at the 71st Precinct have been joined by officers from every single borough in this city. We have also been told that detectives are being ordered into uniform. Now, the police commissioner denies that this show of force should have been implemented sooner, but there is no question tonight a massive blue wall is solidly surrounding the streets of Crown Heights.
Have not been assigned at this time across the street by the tow trucks now.
By 2 o'clock this afternoon, columns of cops with now familiar riot gear had already amassed at this staging area at Lincoln Terrace Park in Brooklyn. It is one of several point locations for units that include mounted patrol officers and motorcycle officers. The new Get Tough strategy announced yesterday was well in place last night. As police choppers spotlighted possible trouble areas, cops delivered on a promise to disperse any unlawful gatherings. 100 people were arrested.
Hopefully the message goes out to everybody that you can't break the law with impunity. If you come out to break the law, you're going to be arrested.
But the violence has already taken a big toll. Since it first erupted Monday night, 145 cops and 25 civilians have been injured by rocks, bottles, bricks, and shotgun pellets. Officers we talked to today who were getting their marching orders told us we're glad that this new Get Tough policy is finally in place, but they think the response should have happened a lot sooner.
I think he woke up.
You think he finally woke up?
Exactly.
Were you frustrated that he hadn't woken up before?
Yeah, before, yeah, I was.
Definitely. It's too late. Too many people are getting hurt. Too many cops are getting hurt. Too many civilians are going to get hurt. The only way you're going to stop this is by taking these people in.
Do you think it should have happened before?
Absolutely.
Commissioner, are you going to beef up any more patrols considering that this is the Sabbath tonight and that a lot of Hasidics may be out tomorrow, or are there going to be any added reinforcement?
We are constantly monitoring what goes on. We have a command post set up here at One Police Plaza, and as situations change, we will respond accordingly.
And we did ask the commissioner how long he expects this show of force to continue. He said, quote, as long as this nonsense continues, but that hopefully the mayor and community leaders will succeed in passing out this message and that it will be taken to heart that this violence is not the answer. Live from the 71st Precinct, Sarah Wallace, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Nightfall, as you know, in Crown Heights this week has brought fear and uncertainty until the latest crackdown provided a sense of control. David Navarro reports that people are now feeling better about walking the streets.
The day after the police department's crackdown on Crown Heights, many residents emerged from behind locked doors with a sense of hope.
You're going into the weekend with a good feeling?
Good feeling, everything be cool.
Much safer than we were 2 nights ago, much safer. Last night was more or less a peaceful night. They did do arrests, which we wanted them to do long ago.
Among many in the Hasidic community, a sense of normalcy returned to the streets. Many stores did a brisk business in anticipation of the Sabbath. Some feared that the laws which prohibit carrying any kind of protection from sundown tonight until sundown tomorrow would make them vulnerable. But after last night's police action, the residents we spoke to today are no longer worried.
It seems that it's going to be quiet because the community leaders and the rest of the people, in the community are taking part in all the discussions.
But just a couple of blocks east, the sense of relief many in the Hasidim are feeling tonight cannot be found as easily here in the black community.
Things are calming down now, but afterwards you will have to see if both sides of the community come and talk to each other.
Here, burnt vehicles still litter the street, and a memorial where 7-year-old Gavin Cato was killed by a Hasidic driver reminds people who pass by that tensions will not just disappear.
The accident only heightens those kind of feelings that were naturally within people all along.
But for the time being, Crown Heights goes into the weekend under the watchful eye of a police force apparently no longer afraid to take action. Reporting from Crown Heights, David Navarro, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Mayor Dinkins is once again leading the call for calm in Crown Heights. The mayor joined a group of religious and community leaders on the steps of City Hall today, where he urged Crown Heights residents to show respect for their neighbors.
We cannot and we will not solve our problems with violence. We cannot ever allow fear and distrust to tear apart our community.
The mayor says communication is one reason why the level of violence seems to be dissipating.
Greg, it was 2 years ago today that 16-year-old Yusuf Hawkins was murdered by a mob in Bensonhurst, a racial attack which tore apart that Brooklyn community. What has happened to the state of race relations in New York since then? Are things better or worse? On the surface, it would seem things are worse this summer, from a series of bias crimes in Canarsie to the outbreak of violence in Crown Heights. But for the past 3 years, the number of bias crimes has basically remained steady. In 1988, 550 bias crimes were reported. In 89, 541. And in 1990, 527. And police point out, when you compare the first 7 months of this year with the same period last year, bias crimes are down 30%.
One is hard-pressed to say, you know, that it's better or it's worse. I think in many respects things are, some of the tensions reflect the gains that African Americans and Caribbean Americans and Latino Americans make as the city becomes a more minority city.
Ryder says many outbreaks of racial violence are set off by a single incident that brings long-standing tensions to the surface. In the case of Crown Heights, a black community frustrated by what it sees as ongoing discrimination.
The blacks are going to jail while the whites are going to college.
We've known for a very long time that there are communities like Canarsie and Bensonhurst and Crown Heights that have serious racial, economic, and social problems. If you deny that reality, ignore it, after a long period of time, it festers, and then one day it blows up in your face, and that's what we're seeing.
So far, the short-term solution has been to increase police presence, but many say long-term preventive measures are needed, like this high school course that teaches racial tolerance.
Asian American stereotypes, all right? Your hand went up right away.
Fruit stands, most of them on
fruit stands.
The class is run by two civil rights lawyers. It started 2 years ago after Yusuf Hawkins was killed in Bensonhurst. The goal? To make young people aware of racism and teach them respect for others. Teacher Norman Siegel says the program is a success, but he says it desperately needs to be expanded.
Every one of the 108 high schools in the
troubled neighborhood.
More than 1,000 people marched through troubled Crown Heights. Reverend Al Sharpton led the marchers. Together, they demanded the arrest of Yosef Glish. Police say last Monday, the Hasidic Jew drove his car through a red light and careened onto the sidewalk, striking and killing 7-year-old Gavin Cato. Cato's 7-year-old cousin Angela was also critically injured. The incident ignited 3 days of clashes between black youth, Jews, and police.
We stopped in front of his home on Eastern Parkway. We know he was not there, which is why we did not storm to get him. We know of some travel plans and other things of him. We intend to go through with the citizen's arrest.
Mayor Dinkins and other city leaders say Cato's death is not the only cause of the racial unrest. The other reason is anger among the youth. Community youth leader Richard Green says more than anger, black youth are feeling pain.
It goes way beyond what happened this last week. We see this in our community every day. Young people unemployed, out of schools. I'm hearing it. I'm hearing the same stories every time. Don't have a job. Don't have nothing to look forward to except these streets. It's a pain that translates into what I call rage.
While the demonstrators march, others work to restore peace. A group of young people met at PS 167 to discuss solutions to the crisis.
We're also putting together families in both communities to do a home-to-home sharing. So have some of the Lubavitcher families come to the African-American community and vice versa.
Something like an exchange program.
An exchange.
We're also going to be going and asking the city to look at some after-school job programs. Right now there's a program in Manhattan for the after-school year-round program. We want one of those programs right here in Brooklyn.
The young people also want the city to renovate an old building into a community youth center. They will name it in honor of Gavin Cato. The Youth Peace Force says in order to stop violent outbreaks from reoccurring, the Jewish and black communities will have to find a common ground. And the young people say they hope the program
said the dream turned into a nightmare.
As solemn and emotional as this scene was here at Kennedy Airport, C. Vernon Mason and Colin Moore, the attorney for the family, contends that the criminal justice system has been equally insensitive.
All indications are that there will be no indictment in this case. I spoke with the district attorney yesterday who's assigned to the case. I asked her specifically, what crime are you investigating? And she said none. That she has an open-ended grand jury presentation, which for those of us in the criminal justice system, it means that there's nothing going on in that grand jury.
This family has suffered a great bereavement, and it's not only the insensitivity of the criminal justice system, it's the insensitivity of the Hasidic community. Up to now, not only has Joseph Lise not been arrested, but no member of the Hasidic community has expressed any remorse, any contrition, has sent a wreath, has sent a flower, has sent a card to any member of the families.
The Hasidic community watched the procession along Eastern Parkway but refused comment out of respect to the Jewish Sabbath. Rabbi Shmuel Buttman, a spokesman for the Hasidic community, would not comment on camera. But while not mentioning the Reverend Al Sharpton by name, the rabbi off camera attributed much of the violence to outside agitators, black leaders from outside Crown Heights.
I would tell the Hasidic Jewish community that they're going to have to come down and deal with an equal footing in that community, or they better get some moving bands.
Following a private rally attended by an estimated 1,000 people, Alton, Maddox, and Sharpton reaffirmed their commitment to make a citizen's arrest of Yosef Lizef, the Hasidic Jew who drove the vehicle that struck and killed Gavin Cato. Chuck Curry, Fox 5 News.
And right now, leaders of the Hasidic community are holding a press conference where they're going to say that while everything seems all right at this moment...
Earlier today, they echoed with the sounds of peaceful protest. Kathy Phillips is live in Crown Heights with more on the march and the mood there tonight. Kathy.
And Jay, you're right. It has been a relatively quiet night here in Crown Heights. The massive police presence continues to keep a lid on any problem spots. There were 4 arrests earlier in the evening for disorderly conduct and bottle throwing. That was about 6 o'clock, but it's been quiet since. It was quiet on the streets of Crown Heights tonight. Police and residents still standing off at the corner where Gavin Cato was killed. Residents are now saying that it was not just the death of the boy that touched off the anger, but a long-standing feeling of inequality.
It's hurt. That child got killed. Half the people who demonstrate don't even know the child, but they're hurting too because of something that went on last year, the year before, 10 years ago.
Jews who are speaking out again after the Sabbath ended at sundown tonight are worried about future violence.
This is why we are saying to the mayor of the city of New York, to the governor of the state of New York, and to the president of the United States that we want a safe community.
A march by about 1,000 people through Brooklyn today, led by the Reverend Al Sharpton, went peacefully. Sharpton again called for the arrest of the man driving the car that killed Gavin Cato.
The issue is that there must be justice if you ever want real peace.
Some observers said the march may have opened some eyes.
We got to start stopping things somewhere. We got to start somewhere with something. So to me, I think it's good. At least you'll get a response one way or the other.
Asher Rishon sees all of this from a unique perspective. He's an Orthodox Jew who is also black, and he says people have got to learn to live together.
It's not a matter, are these issues legitimate? It's questionable on both sides, but the perception is what's causing this trouble, and we have to deal with these perceptions to cure both sides of this case, or we're going to go on this forever with this.
Well, the Reverend Al Sharpton has now called for a moratorium, no more demonstrations, no more marches in Crown Heights until after Monday. That's when Gavin Cato will be buried, and police are hoping that it will remain peaceful here until then. We're live in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. I'm Tappy Phillips, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Thanks, Tappy. So what about the overall mood of the Crown Heights community in the midst of the violence and the marches and all the media attention we've seen in the past week? Well, for many there, life simply goes on with a bit more fear, more concern, and more than ever with a hope for healing. Keiko Suda reports.
The streets were quiet this morning in the Brooklyn community of Crown Heights, where Hasidic residents were observing their Sabbath. But while it was business as usual for many residents, some say they're still living in fear given this week's looting and violence. This store owner says he's afraid the worst is yet to come.
It's nerve-wracking, it really is. I mean, I would rather be somewhere in Queens than over here today. I really would.
Kerry was concerned about the Reverend Al Sharpton's march today. He says he's also fearful that next week's funeral services for 7-year-old Gavin Cato could trigger further destruction. Today, Eyewitness News got exclusive pictures of Mayor Dinkins and Police Commissioner Lee Brown touring the area where much of the violence has taken place.
The more contact and communication you have first-hand basis, the more you learn, the more you know.
Mayor Dinkins laid this wreath at his last stop in Crown Heights today. It's the place where Yaakov Rosenbaum was stabbed. One Hasidic resident who declined to comment on camera said the gesture was too little, too late. This resident told reporters he believes Mayor Dinkins' visit was nothing but an attempt to repair his political career. But others like Joel Bastian said they were thrilled the mayor made the tour.
He's only one man. People got to know he's only one man. He can't do everything.
While there is disagreement over how Mayor Dinkins should have handled this week's events, most residents we spoke with agree they'd like to see the continued police presence until the threat of all violence disappears. In Crown Heights, Keiko Suda, Channel 7 Eyewitness.
Live team coverage for you tonight. Perry Peltz is at a wake for the young boy whose death sparked this turmoil, and Julian Phillips is with the mayor right now on Eastern Parkway. Julian?
Yes, well, Ralph, the mayor left here earlier, but no one can deny the fact that he certainly has been a hands-on mayor this week, trying to bring two groups of people together. Now, besides various meetings he held in this community today, there were stops at two major religious institutions, one black, the other Jewish. Mayor Dinkins entered the sanctuary of the First Baptist Church in Crown Heights to applause and later a standing ovation. A haven for the mayor, much unlike the greeting he received last week in front of the Cato home, where there was concern for his safety and he was often booed.
The First Baptist Church of Crown Heights, its pastor, its officers, members, we stand squarely behind him, with him, and we are willing to work with him in whatever plans he has to bring a peaceful solution to this crisis.
The mayor's spirited speech touched upon the events of the past week. The death of young Gavin Cato, killed in an accident Monday night by a station wagon driven by a sedum, and the violence that followed, taking the life of Yankel Rosenbaum, the rabbinical student from Australia.
We have an opportunity now to right old wrongs, to heal old wounds, and to make our city a better, more just place.
And with those words, he told the packed audience that at that very moment, the Brooklyn DA's office was moving fast to complete their investigation of the accident that took young Cato's life.
There will not be one brand of justice for one community and a different brand of justice for another.
But besides a community with two groups at odds for years, the mayor touched upon a point that perhaps was a major concern for many this past week: youth and the violence and the need for role models.
We must provide options for our young people. They've got to have something else to do other than stand around on corners.
Later, the mayor arriving at the world headquarters for the Lubavitch Hasidic movement. A brief meeting with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Menachem Schneerson.
One side, one people, united by the management of New York City.
We're all God's children.
That would be a double portion of diplomatic blessing.
That's a lot. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Well, it was a 4 to 5 minute meeting, a brief meeting, the Rebbe receiving the mayor warmly and extending his blessings for the mayor to bring peace to this city. The Rebbe explained that we are not two sides in this, not black, not Jewish, but one people living under one city, under one government. Another move to help heal the wounds. And continuing our coverage, we now go to Perry Peltz, who's standing by live outside the funeral home, where earlier there was a wake for Gavin Cato. Perry.
Well, Julian, in fact, Gavin Cato's family has just left the House of Hills funeral home. The family is now headed over to the church where a public wake is scheduled for 7 o'clock this evening. Now, the mayor was also here earlier today to pay a visit at this private ceremony. Family and friends of the Cato family hold a wake at the House of Hills funeral home in Crown Heights. Mayor Dinkins consoles the grief-stricken family. A private ceremony in preparation for tomorrow's funeral service for 7-year-old Gavin Cato. In Crown Heights, there are still signs of continued anger and tension. Outside the Cato residence, amidst heavy police protection, people try to block our camera shots. There are signs that read, "The white man is the devil." But as you travel past this locus of trouble, there are some signs that racially torn Crown Heights is on the mend.
It's not as bad as 2 days ago. Things are looking much better now.
I think now is a little bit better. And I wish all will be, every time will be good.
Outside of the Lubavitch Hasidic sect headquarters on Eastern Parkway, blacks and Hasidim walk freely.
Today, a huge crowd of mourners gathered to say goodbye, as we hear now from Diana Williams.
Family members cried out loudly as they walked past the open casket this morning at St. Anthony's Baptist Church. It was 1 week ago today that 7-year-old Gavin Cato and another child were hit by a car driven by an Hasidic man. The incident sparked 3 nights of violence in Crown Heights. Even today, what began as a service to mourn Cato's death quickly turned into a rally for justice. Mayor Dinkins was among those calling for peace, speaking briefly at the 2-hour service.
Let us honor the life of young Gavin Cato. Let us build bridges of faith and hope and trust between people. And most of all, let us increase the peace.
But there were few assurances that the peace of the past few days would continue.
I hear the words, peace. But they don't want peace, they just want quiet.
All of you who have talked about violence, well, let me tell you something. Ain't nobody on this face of earth have had more violence inflicted and imposed on them than us. It's only when we start responding that others say stop the violence.
Outside the service, a crowd gathered, and there was brief tension when the casket was brought outside. But the procession marched peacefully to the cemetery, where a human blockade was set up to keep the press and police outside. Some were upset that there were so many police and so much shouting at Cato's funeral. But others say long after this service, Gavin Cato will be remembered in Crown Heights. Reporting from Crown Heights, I'm Diana Williams, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Relative calm prevailed at the funeral, and life in Crown Heights is slowly returning to normal. But there is still one big difference: the huge police presence that continues to keep the peace in that community. Sarah Wallace is live in Crown Heights with more on the story. Sarah, what's going on?
Well, Greg, indeed, the massive show of force continues. Now, the prime focus of officers here at the 71st Precinct and hundreds of others today was the funeral of Gavin Cato just a few blocks away. And although police were met with angry words, taunts, and a momentary threat of violence, there was no major outbreak of hostilities. Planning for a massive crowd, police set up barricades early this morning and closed off surrounding streets to traffic an hour before Gavin Cato's funeral. Officers manned rooftops and the police chopper circled above, but for the most part, the police presence was deliberately low-key, at least initially. As the service was ending, there was a brief flare-up outside when someone apparently pushed someone else, but the police quickly moved in. Quite literally, within seconds, almost as if appearing from nowhere, officers in riot helmets had flooded the area. The greeting from spectators, hostile. Police officials say the problem started when a member of activist Sonny Carson's group shoved the chief of department. Motorcycle units also converged on the scene. A moving blue wall then formed two columns as the funeral procession headed up Utica Avenue.
Just go back over there where you were.
Meantime, by mid-afternoon, hundreds of other officers had gathered at this staging area on Crown Street for their assignments. How long are you anticipating this massive force out here?
We're going to continue to monitor the situation, and we'll make adjustments accordingly. Right now, we intend to keep the full detail and complement of police officers in the area until we're assured that it's quieted down.
Today, 9:30, and maybe work until about 1 or 2 in the morning.
Is the extra money worth it?
I don't think so.
Why?
I'd rather be home with my family. I have kids I haven't seen for a couple of days. I'd like to go home and see them.
Well, officially, the police department says it hasn't yet compiled the figures as to how much this is all costing. But one highly placed source puts the figure at $300,000 a day in overtime. That means $1.5 million up to now, and the week is just beginning. Live
numbers in that neighborhood as residents try to get their lives back to normal. Meanwhile, advisors to the family of the young boy whose death sparked the violence are now calling for a special prosecutor.
Well, there will be no cooperation from the Cato family or any of the witnesses that we have with Mr. Hines, and we're calling upon the governor to appoint a special prosecutor.
So far, no charges have been filed against the driver of the car that hit Gavin Cato. At an afternoon news conference, the lawyer for the Hasidic community said there is no need for a special prosecutor. Attorney Barry Slotnick said a special prosecutor is not justified.
I think the people of Kings County have elected a district attorney who, by the way, is well known and loved in all communities, had some hand and some role to play in the Howard Beach case and prosecuted the Bensonhurst case, as you all well know.
Whoever the prosecutor, they will be investigating the tragic accident that started all of this. In an effort to learn what evidence is considered in such investigations, David Navarro talked to an accident reconstruction expert today.
The scene where a tragic accident sparked a Brooklyn community into violence is now a memorial for 7-year-old Gavin Cato. But from the beginning, the facts about what really happened that Monday night have been clouded by rumors and wild accusations. Last Thursday, a grand jury was impaneled to investigate the accident and to determine if the 29-year-old Hasidic driver is guilty of a crime. The key testimony in all of this will come from a Dr. James Pugh, an accident reconstruction expert.
He will be trying to get as much physical evidence at the accident scene as he can, and then evaluate that evidence to come to a conclusion.
Although the accident expert we spoke to today has not been to the scene or investigated the case, we asked him to reconstruct what happened that night as best he could from the information that has been reported. By plotting in data, his computer instantly applies the laws of physics to an incident long after it has occurred. This simulation shows Yosef Lissif's station wagon heading west on President Street. The Hasidic driver had fallen behind a 3-car motorcade of Hasidim coming from the cemetery. When Lissif got to the intersection of Utica Avenue and President Street, witnesses say a car going south on Utica swiped Lissif's wagon. Our expert says the rear damage to the wagon is consistent with that. Assuming this is true, our expert says Lissif traveled in a direction consistent with a vehicle traveling near or 5 miles over the speed limit in Crown Heights.
Looks to me like about 35 miles per hour. That impact with the wall.
There's no way for our expert to know if the light was red or if Lissif was on a car phone at the time, as some have charged. But the physical evidence suggests Lissif could not avoid running up on the curb once he was hit. The Brooklyn DA's office says Lissif tested negative for alcohol at the time of the incident. And unless the DA's accident expert can prove Lissif committed
racial injustice for Brooklyn activists. To them, Gavin Cato is turned into a political martyr, sacrificed because the car that accidentally hit him was part of an official Hasidic motorcade. But as the grand jury weighs possible charges against the driver, Yosef Lifsa, the Cato family advisors are employing a familiar scenario. As in previous cases, they will not cooperate with Brooklyn DA Joe Hines or the grand jury. They demand a special prosecutor and claim unidentified witnesses say the driver was drunk on schnapps.
We have all of these witnesses who are prepared to testify, but we are not prepared, may I say, to put them before Mr. Hines' grand jury.
The driver of the automobile was not drunk.
Barry Slotnick, the driver's attorney, stresses the police breathalyzer shows there was absolutely no alcohol on his client's breath.
He had a breathalyzer test taken which proved to be 000.
After the accident, a breathalyzer test showed 000 in alcohol in his system.
Is that?
This is from the authorities.
You
say that's
let me
wrong?
just finish, sir. That is the self-serving statement by Mr. Hines, which I heard. Now let me ask you.
You're saying that's not true.
The point is,
the breathalyzer isn't good enough for you.
Why would they conduct a breathalyzer test in the first instance?
Because it may be a standard procedure. Standard procedure.
Only if there is a suspicion.
No, sir.
That
Standard procedure.
If there is a suspicion that a driver is involved, is somehow intoxicated.
Tonight in a telephone interview, Hines told me he believes the witnesses are fabricated.
The driver was tested 1 hour and 10 minutes after the tragedy, and the breathalyzer results were 000.
Where could this information be coming from if apparently he was not?
Well, what can I tell you? I don't believe we will ever see these kind of witnesses. I don't believe they exist. I think that for whatever reason this is done to distract the work of the grand jury, and it will proceed.
The grand jury is expected to make its announcement known sometime next week, but many observers believe an indictment of the driver is not even legally possible because of the way New York state traffic laws are written. If that is the case, the Cato advisors may claim the system does not work, but the reason may be because that's the way the law is written. In Brooklyn, I'm Eric Shawn, Fox 5 News.
Restoring peace in Crown Heights cost the city a total of $4.3 million. More than 2,000 police officers were called into the neighborhood at the height of the rioting last week. Has the latest now. Lou.
There is, of course, a federal civil rights investigation, as we reported exclusively last night on News 4, Carol. But first, News 4 has learned that the grand jury, the state grand jury, looking into last Monday's car crash that killed 7-year-old Gavin Cato here in Crown Heights, it will likely finish up its work next week as it tries to explore the possible criminal liability of the Hasidic Jewish driver of that car. That, as representatives of the Cato family call for the Brooklyn DA to step aside, a request the DA says is absurd. In 1987, Charles Joe Hines was a special state prosecutor for corruption in the criminal justice system in New York State. He is also the man who prosecuted the controversial Howard Beach case. Tonight, activists representing the family of Gavin Cato say they want Hines, who is now the Brooklyn DA, replaced with a special prosecutor because he took a trip to Israel with other city officials, a trip paid for by a Jewish organization.
It is, in our judgment, impossible for an official that depends on the Hasidics to vote for him, that goes on junkets sponsored by them, to be trusted to impartially investigate this matter.
Tonight, contacted by phone, the DA tells me he's pressing ahead with a Brooklyn grand jury. He says he is getting cooperation from witnesses, and he'll deal with anyone who interferes with his investigation.
It's foolish. I mean, I was invited, participated in the Martin Luther King museum ceremonies back in July in Memphis, Tennessee. I hope no one would suggest that I was somehow paid for by the African-American interest who ran that. The whole thing is just silly, and it's designed to raise distractions which with a hope that this grand jury is somehow going to be stopped, and it's not going to be stopped.
Now, the trip to Israel was paid for by a group called the Jewish Community Relations Committee, not the Hasidim. The DA is particularly upset about public charges that the driver of the car, Yosef Lish, was drunk at the time. He says that there was a test, a breathalyzer test, conducted about an hour after the incident, and that came up zero. Whatever Mr. Lish is guilty of, it apparently is not drunk driving. Colin Moore, the attorney for the Cato family, alleges that he has a witness to a police cover-up of the fact that there was some sort of drunk driving involved. The DA says if
there will be no violence, and I think the indication was there will be none.
And in its place, between the black leaders and representatives of the Hasidic community, the hope is for peace. At the heart of it, there is now a strong effort here to understand one another.
This is the first step for the two communities to understand each other's cultures, beliefs, needs, etc.
That will be translated into the streets. Leadership, in its simplest form, means followers. If the leadership is together, then the followers naturally will come together.
Out here on the streets, where Aaron Raskin and his family have run this fruit and vegetable business for nearly 30 years.
Communication is very important. Talk is, there was always talk, and there should be talk further.
27 years George Williams has lived here in Crown Heights. He thinks perhaps the rocks and bottles were thrown out of frustration. But is there hope anywhere? At least in the talk?
I think it's some hope. I think that they both should, you know. And then it's been a tense situation, still tense, you know. I think it's some hope.
It won't come tomorrow or the next day. But George Williams believes it can come when people come to an understanding.
You have to sit down and talk and you know, communicate with one another.
Well, the group of leaders also believe that discussion is important to ensure that there is also peace at the Caribbean Day Parade that runs through Crown Heights this Labor Day. One of the men at the center of the Crown Heights crisis, Brooklyn District Attorney Charles Hines, was in Chicago today speaking to a group of district attorneys. Mr. Hines brought the Black Prosecutors Conference up to date on the situation in Crown Heights and gave them his response to the often asked question, if a black person had been driving the car that hit the two children, wouldn't an arrest have been immediate?
Since January 1, 1989, 22 people have been involved in vehicular deaths in Brooklyn. There's been no arrest. All violations of speeding or marginal speeding, stop signs or traffic lights. And of the 22 not arrested, 10 were African American, 9 were white, 1 was an Arab American, and 2 were Latino.
Mr. Hines told the prosecutors that he expects the grand jury in the case to finish its work sometime next week. When we continue with Eyewitness News.